this for about 21 years now, and I guess the main thing the reason I do this is I'm trying to teach the lessons of the Holocaust. I think in America we're learning a lot about the Holocaust, but I'm not sure we're learning from it. And so I believe there's a lesson for all human beings in what happened in the Holocaust, that it could and actually has happened again. And so I use the Holocaust history to challenge Americans to look at the presence of racism, hatred, prejudice, and intolerance in their communities, in their schools, in their families, and in their individual hearts. Because I think there's many, many lessons to be learned, a warning to the future from the Holocaust, what happened in Germany. And that's my motivation in doing this message.
This has got to be one of those. Remembering that fact you were taught in science class months ago, a plan takes shape, a desperate plan. Your plan, I've got to get higher. I've got to beat the gas. I want to live. I want to survive. Your plan takes shape. Something tells you to run towards the center of this room. But you got something holding you back, remember? Your 9-year-old brother, locked on your leg. You've got an awful moral decision to make, but make it you do. And once having made your decision, you are now actually thankful for the complete and total cover of darkness that surrounds you. Because you know that darkness will now be your friend. Because that darkness will shield from other eyes what it is you've decided to do. And you coldly figure only two will ever know. You and your 9-year-old brother. And you coldly figure it's probably not going to matter much longer for him anyway. Having made your decision, now with special cruelty, you carry it out. Yes, you actually lean down, and yes, you fight your 9-year-old brother to get him off your leg. He screams, "Why? You've never done this before." The question troubles you deeply. It almost makes you stop. But somehow, you're able to flick a switch, and you shut off his screams. They're still there. You just don't hear them. And you continue the brutal fight. You cannot believe the strength of his grip. But eventually you prove stronger than he. You break your 9-year-old brother's grip. You shove him to the floor to die alone. You kick off the back wall and you run towards the center of this room, falling over bodies as you go. You get to the center of this room and you're almost smothered to death in a pile. But you fight your way out. And now begins the biggest and deadliest game of King on the Hill you've ever played. Only this time, the hill is other struggling, suffering, dying human beings like you. You kick and punch and fight and claw your way up this pile. You're kicked and punched and dragged back down. But you are strong. And you have a will to live that's this much greater than anybody else locked in this death chamber. And guess what? You win. You gain victory. You achieve the top of the pile. You're king. Your back is literally pressed against the ceiling of this room. There's nowhere to go. But you can't relax. Why? Because you've got to fight to keep your crown. Because there are those underneath you fighting to take it from you. And you have to fight to maintain your spot at the top. But all this means for all your struggle, for all your fight, all this means is you endure this nightmare for 14 or 15 minutes longer than the first to fall. Why? Because there's that second property of gas you learned about in science class. That one you'd forgotten about in your terror this day. It really wouldn't have mattered had you remembered. The laws of nature will follow their course regardless of your awareness of them at any given time. True to the first law, you'd played the odds right on that one. Cyclone B was in fact one of those gases that is in fact heavier than air. You played that one right. The Cyclone B remained on the floor of the chamber and slowly spread out. You'd safely defeated that law on top of the pile. Others, including your 9-year-old brother, had not been so fortunate. He lay already dead back in the dark corner. His journey ended. But true to the second law, the one you'd forgotten about, a gas will expand to fill the volume of space it's given. Once the volume of floor space was taken, following the second law, The Cyclone B gas had nowhere else to go but up. And they planned it that way. And even though it's pitch dark, you see it coming. Why? Because the pile underneath you gets quieter, the fight gets easier, and eventually the two underneath you stop struggling. And at that point, you take an enormous breath, and you hold it, and you hold it, and you hold it. And for the 42 or 48 or 53 seconds that you're able to hold that final breath, you do a hell of a lot of remembering. The images of a lifetime well lived. The thousands of images of a lifetime, albeit a short lifetime, your lifetime, go flashing past in a blur of color, texture, and memory. And at 53 seconds, your lungs are screaming. And you start letting out little bursts of air from the air trapped in your lungs. And as you do that, you think of your sister. Why? Because it was she who had taught you to do that swimming at the Rock Quarry Lake last summer. She said, you want to hold your breath longer underwater? Hold it till it really hurts. And then slowly let out some of the air that's in your lungs. It'll buy you more time. That little trick bought you an extra 14 or 15 seconds. And somewhere 4 or 5 seconds into that 15 seconds, suddenly, you remembered. It's Saturday today, remember? But this was not to be just any ordinary Saturday in the chain of your life. This was to have been a very special Saturday. This was to have been the Saturday upon which you celebrated your achievement, your graduation from high school. And you realize what time of day it is outside right now? And you realize that graduation is probably happening right now back in your home village. You picture the room it's in. You know it well. You know it very well. You were there a year ago to celebrate with your sister. You wonder if this year, have they placed some extra chairs up there? Empty chairs? Maybe one of them with your name on it in your memory? You'll never know, because now you realize that graduation is not going to happen for you this day. But now you understand a much more deeply troubling and fundamental truth. You now understand there is not going to be a graduation for you ever, anywhere, anytime. Because now you understand the pages of the book telling the story of your life story. Those pages are rapidly reaching their end. And that book, the story of your life, is going to be a much shorter book than you ever dreamed possible. In those next 5 seconds in your mind, you actually try to open and read the acceptance letter that you now know you'll never read. You try to picture the patients you now know you'll never treat as a doctor. You try to wonder at the medical cures that'll never be brought to humanity and the thousands of lives that thereby may have been saved, because you will not be alive to find those cures. At 5 seconds, you try to picture the face of the man or woman with whom you now know you'll never fall in love. At 2 seconds, strangely, through no volition of your own, the image of an infant child explodes into your mind. Shocked, you turn and look into the face of that child. The child is too young for you to recognize whether it's a boy or a girl. But immediately, in that child's eyes, you recognize something very familiar to you. In that child's eyes, you see your own eyes. And as bizarre as this may seem, in this circumstance, you actually experience the human emotion of thankfulness for just a second or two. Thankfulness to whatever higher power or entity it may have been that gave you the gift, albeit for 2 seconds, the gift of being able to look into the face of the infant child, your son or daughter, you now know you'll never hold. Time is up. Your lungs are screaming. The image of the child explodes from your mind. In one final desperate bid at life, you crane your neck and you force your face into the cement ceiling of this chamber. You press your face so violently into that cement, you physically break your nose. Your plan, can I literally suck some air out of the cement, some good air, to get me to hang on until they turn on those ventilation motors and suck out the deadly gas that I might live to see one more sunrise, please God? You press your nose into that cement, you suck in air, and immediately feel it tightening in your throat. And you realize this, your final plan, has also failed. What the Cyclone B does in most cases is it physically constricts or collapses the windpipe. When the windpipe collapses in the human body, the mind takes over. Your mind loses control and the body takes over. Your body will involuntarily start jerking like this, trying to save itself forcing air into your lungs, starving for air. You'd felt the bodies jerking underneath you in the pile. You didn't know why, now you did. It was too late, you couldn't stop it, it was involuntary. You slowly and painfully suffocated for an eternal 14, 15, 16, perhaps 17 seconds. And eventually that final gasp was enough. Enough Cyclone B entered your system, and it did its work. And its work was to extinguish that light that had burned inside your heart since the day of your birth. And with the passing of that light, you died. And with your death went your hopes, your dreams, the difference that you might have made in this world with those talents and gifts that only you possess. It's all over. It's all over. I have just invited you to walk a journey as one human being would have lived, suffered, and died this journey.